So tonight we're going to cover secrets, principles. There was, I got a little bit of extra assistance as I was putting the presentation together, and the principles, a service principle is spelled with the ALS ending or AL ending principle. Somebody decided that it should be changed to LE, and I decided, okay, fine, if it be that way, I'm going to use both. So we're going to cover the principles of principles, and then we'll do a demo or walkthrough of a way to sort of get rid of secrets and principles altogether, at least mostly, which we'll get into going secretless. And a particular scenario we'll cover, since this is Azure DevOps, we'll talk about GitHub Actions, which is a CD tool, CI/CD tool from GitHub, if you don't know already. And use OpenID Connect, which is an open standard for authorization. That's pretty popular, and more use cases are being, more and more uses of it are being implemented by the various vendors, and we'll get into a specific use case here. It's been around a while. We're not going to get into the details of OpenID Connect or JWT tokens, except for how it applies to our context tonight. Otherwise, we'd be here for a couple of years covering, too many topics. So we're going to, focus it on using, not on some of the background. So principles, we understand principles. Some people might have principles, principle beliefs, rules, behaviors, theorems, laws. Those are principles. That's the LE spelling. Then we have principal, typically thought of as a person, like, your school's principal. I don't know who this dude is. Maybe you guys know. I don't know. He's a principal. Principal Biggins or something. I don't know. So this is a person who has authority or can act as an agent or a representative. And that really, when you think about a service principal, that's really what we're talking about. We're creating an account, an identifier, a something that's going to act on behalf of us, behalf of our systems, behalf of whatever. The other thing I will say here is that a service principal, that's the Azure term. They call it service principal, but it's also a concept, right? We've used serviced accounts and various, quote unquote fake users for years to proxy credentials or proxy authority into a system. So why do we use service principals? Well, we don't want to use user specific, or my account or Joseph's account or Reese's account or anybody else's account. We want to avoid doing that. When IntelliTech finally gets tired of me and tells me to go home for the rest of my life, we don't want provisioning to be tied to my Phil account. We want to indirect that to be something that can be generally managed. So it's the general idea. And then of course, if we have a lot of situations where we authenticate service to service. Again, this is a situation where we don't usually want to use a user account. We don't ever want to use a user account. Other things to consider, typically when we create a principal or a service account, we're elevating that account in some ways, like giving it extra privileges, like it can deploy into the service principal, can deploy into a production account, whereas my user account, Phil, may not be allowed to access a production account. So that helps us implement separation of concerns. And then we might have more focused privileges. So, my account, Phil, might have general access to a whole bunch of things. We might create service principals that are focused on only being allowed to do a certain set of things, provision a certain set of services as opposed to all the services, for example, or only be able to manage a couple of things as opposed to everything. So those are two other advantages or considerations when we to think about when we use service principals. So a principal generally has two properties: a public ID and a private secret or password. And again, this would be similar. Again, I use service principal, which is really Azure terminology. In AWS land, this would be an account ID and a password, or it might be a quote unquote service account, because AWS doesn't really have the concept of a independent entity. You've got user accounts, you've got roles and policies, which are very powerful, and they offset some of the need for service principals, because policies can be associated with resources, specific resources. They don't have, you don't have to have a principal or anything else. You can just put a policy on a resource and control it that way and not have to worry about a principal or a service or a resource. But there's also this concept of, hey, I've got to do some stuff. I'm in DevOps land. I'm going to do provisioning. I don't want to use my user credentials. I'm going to use a user account and password, and that might be a general purpose account that admins have access to, something like that. I'll also use this. I said AWS a couple of times, and I spouted off about AWS. I am not an AWS expert. I've dabbled in AWS for many years, and actually started being responsible for provisioning production resources in the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months. But before that, it was playing around mostly. Unlike people like Reese, who actually got paid to do AWS stuff, he has been paid to do AWS stuff for a lot longer than me. So anybody on the call or in this conference room, keep me honest with AWS. And again, the other thing, just I'll point out, now that we're a few slides into this, this is a meetup. This isn't necessarily a quote unquote formal presentation. So if you have questions, comments, whatever, post them in the chat. I may or may not look at it, or Joseph, if he's watching it, or just come off mute and speak up. No worries, no issues. So one of the downsides of a service principal, well, it's got to be managed. You got to create it, and you got to go grab that secret. The secrets themselves, these are one-time use or one-time visibility sort of things. When you create a secret or create a service principal, a secret in a service principal, because a service principal can actually have many secrets, which is kind of interesting. You can see the secret, but then if you don't put it somewhere immediately, you're never going to see that secret again, which isn't a huge deal because you can always regenerate the secret. But they're one-time use things, generally speaking. This is true in AWS account ID and password, the password part of it. It's true in service principals, and that's a common paradigm in the industry these days. But therein lies the rub. The secret itself has to be managed. You see it; it's there for a few seconds, or however long that window is open. What are you going to do with that thing? Well, probably not a good idea to put it on a Post-it note, or put it in a file that's going to get checked into a repo, or keep it in a spreadsheet, which I've seen done, or keep it in your special note file of all your super secret stuff. Because that can be compromised, right? And we see this all the time. So it's a secret. Keep it secret. Keep it safe. What are good ways to keep it secret, to keep it safe? We have to be a little bit careful here, because there's a few common themes. I mean, typically you wouldn't put service principal or account IDs into a key vault or a secret store, but you would put them into, let's say, an enterprise password manager. I mean, a lot of corporations have enterprise software, enterprise solutions that manage these passwords for an organization, and they're going to go beyond, a service principal or an account ID. They could be personal access tokens, which come up in services that, again, it might be a common personal access token that needs to be shared. It might get put into a quote unquote password manager, right? And again, if you're going to maintain this this secret that I just talked about, or this password that I just talked about, using a password manager, 1Pass, LastPass, blah, 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 is a good way or a reasonable way to do that if you don't have another way. Ultimately, what these are just wrappers around a key vault or a secret manager. Key vault or secret managers really isn't intended for this password, just this password use. They're intended to be used by applications or services. So, in Azure Key Vault, it's got a bunch of facilities built into it so that, and itself to manage these secrets, somebody, an administrator will go write it, an application then can come in and read it, not be able to write it. The interesting thing about this concept, though, Key Vault, Secret Manager, Password Manager, is I authenticate against this service based on who I am. I'm now, once I've authenticated, I've proven my identity, I'm Phil. Now, as long as somebody configured that vault to allow me access, I'm going to be able to potentially read the secret. So I've taken away, I don't need a secret to access the secrets. I'm now accessing it based on my role, so RBAC. That's a lot easier to manage and control. Plus, when Intelitech retires me, they just remove my account and I don't have to worry about me accessing secrets anymore. All done. And additionally, they can, typically there's facilities in these things that will recycle the secrets, right? So they don't want me to be using that secret. Maybe I did write it down on a Post-it that I took with me in my box of stuff when they sent me on my way. They recycle the secret. That secret's no longer any good. And then again, good policy these days is to recycle secrets often. If you're integrating a service with the secret manager and you have an integrated service, a service that'll support it, you can have the vault or the secret manager or the password manager automatically recycle these secrets for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. So we talked about personal access tokens, just a general idea, Key Vault, Secret Manager, Password Manager. These are things that you have to use these days, you want to use these days. You want to make sure that you're integrating your software with, some sort of secret manager, password manager early on. Get the whatever solution you're going to use, get the APIs figured out, get the integration figured out early on, and then as your application or your solution goes, it grows. As your system grows, it's a lot easier to add secrets to. So something to do. Good principle.
Can you expand on the last bullet point? It says managed with other secrets.
So there's a little bit of meta here, right? So
secrets all the way down.
I got secrets upon secrets upon secrets. So I need to have some secret to get into the vault. But the deal is, even if I use a secret to get into the vault, or if I have, I end up with a personal access token or AWS account ID and password to access this vault. Well, it's a secret that I needed to get to the secrets. But now I can have a list of secrets. I can have, my database, multiple database passwords, multiple environments. Tokens for third-party services, et cetera, et cetera. So I have one secret that can access N secrets, as opposed to saying, I've got to put, a secret here, a secret there, a secret. That's sort of the concept there. That because again, I have gotten resistance. Like, why would I bother with a vault? I have the secret here. Why do I need another place to store the secrets? Well, because A, I can catalog them all. B, they can be refreshed or automatically refreshed. C, I can provision, like maybe these 3 secrets you can see, these other 3 secrets you can see. I can also separate writing from reading, right? I'll let you, Joseph, write the database passwords. I can't write the database passwords, and maybe Phil can't even see them, but the token or an identity that I'll give my application can read the secret, right? And the intent is, and I have to follow some some rules here, but the intent is my application with its identity will go read the secret and it's never visible to anybody. Right? Whereas if I can access it, I can go look at it and I can see it and maybe I'll do something stupid with it, like put it on a Post-it note or in my super secret notepad file that nobody can, text file of secrets that nobody else can see.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, good question, good point, and it's one of those things that again gets a little meta. And of course, the idea here is if we can avoid secrets altogether and minimize the management of secrets, great, awesome, right? Let's what can we do to get rid of them? So a couple scenarios, and we'll get in specifically to OAuth in a minute here. One of them is this identity provider OAuth flows, or OAuth flows. So I'll give Joseph a minute, myself a minute.
The front door was locked.
Oh, there's probably a whole crowd of people storming to get in here.
Freezing out.
Freezing
Can't wait to get in. Who's worth the wait?
There's no one there, but I just wanted to check.
All right.
And a half hour after we started.
Yeah, timing's everything. This isn't the first user group / meetup where that's happened. So we'll talk about OAuth, and again, JWT tokens, et cetera. Again, this is a scenario where I'm going to provide some credential. I'm going to exchange tokens, and as long as as long as my claims are accepted, I'll get a short-lived token that I can then use. Once I'm done with that token, it's gonna go away, never to be used again. So I've eliminated the need to capture a secret. I still have to do some configuration. We'll talk about that in a minute. Azure managed identities. A managed identity in Azure is really a wrapper for a service principal. There's a service principal under the covers. Yeah, secrets all the way down. But the idea there is I can do RBAC, role-based access control on the managed identity in a lot of ways that I wouldn't have been able to do with a service principal. So now again, I can say this managed identity, I've created it, and I'm going to say it can read secrets. It can write to a storage account. It can do other stuff, and it might be the managed identity that I give to an application, web app. It's like this web app is going to run under this managed identity. So this web app has this managed identity. It reaches out to the key vault. The key vault says, yeah, I know that managed identity. I'll give up the keys that are needed, database connection strings or whatever to this application. Or I'll let it write to a storage account. In AWS, there's a similar concept, except for the fact that you really have roles and policies which can be assigned to ARNs, which is I don't even know, AWS resource node?
Amazon resource name, I think.
Amazon resource name. Thank you.
Is that like a GUID in Amazon land?
It's like a GUID is like random, whereas the ARN,
Or like a unique identifier.
it's a unique identifier, but it has like a pattern to it. We'll actually see a couple in a minute here. So again, if you're paying attention, you can kind of figure out what the service is. But the nice thing there is I don't have to worry about another identity. I can say I can attach a role or attach a policy and say any service that has this role and meets these other criteria will be allowed to have access. So it's a little bit more complicated to configure and maintain, but it's pretty powerful. So, and again, we'll talk a little bit about that. So there is a scenario where I can provision all these things without having to pass secrets around. Now, to get them provisioned, I probably did something that needed an account, but I'm at least account with maybe a secret or a key, but at least I'm minimizing the the number of keys that I have or who I need to give keys to, right? That's another key.
In your example with like a web app that's run, I guess, by like a managed identity, you mentioned like maybe it would talk to a storage service and the storage service knows the managed identity.
Yeah.
What does like knows mean in that case? And
So RBAC, right? So I go role-based access control. I go to the storage account and I say, anybody in the admins group can delete the storage account. Anybody in the users group can read or use this storage account. I can take that managed identity and I can add it to the users group. Gotcha. Or I can say, add the managed identity directly to the, that's sort of the concept, right?
Okay.
And then mileage is going to vary based on the service, but the managed identity has kind of worked its way through most of the Azure services.
So it's just kind of normal RBAC. It's not anything like specific necessarily to managed identity.
Correct. It's not, well, the managed identity now can be provisioned as if it was RBAC.
Okay.
So as opposed to, and again, there really wasn't a way to do this with service principles. There's exceptions to that rule based on service, but the app or the service principle wasn't really represented as an identity in the directory, whereas a managed identity is an identity. Okay, and again, that's not universally true. There's exceptions, because again, it's kind of an evolving cloud story, right? The Microsoft's rapidly gotten to the point of, managed identity as the way to do this. AWS, its roles and policies, it was sort of built from the ground up to handle these scenarios. So, and again, that's one reason people like it better. Being a longtime Azure person, I look at roles and policies and I go, wow, there's a lot there, and wow, you got to get a lot set up to get going. So, a lot of power, but and again, keep asking. So we want to get into scenarios.
I can't wait to hear how this GIF is.
What's that?
I can't wait to hear how this GIF applies.
You think it applies to something?
Oh, okay.
Just trying to
grab attention.
I figured by this time I've been talking for a half an hour and people are asleep. So I give them a little, oof, oof.
Talk wrong.
I've got a very good ability to put people asleep. It's just, the voice and the delivery. 10 minutes, I can put you to sleep. Okay, so some scenarios, some demos. We'll just take a look at CLI just to maybe reinforce a couple of points. And I rebooted, but I did fire up PowerShell. And this is probably invisible. Can you guys?
No.
You cannot see it.
That's a good idea.
I'm just watching the video.
You should be able to see it shortly. Now you can see it on the.
Yeah.
Is it
can we zoom in like maybe one or two times?
Another reason to use Windows Terminal. Boop, 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 boop. I love it. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
One more. One less.
I like it.
Yet another reason to use Windows Terminal. All right, so I'm going to, actually doesn't matter where I am. I'm just going to clear the screen. So now we have command line interfaces. So typically the way you're going to configure a command line interface for AWS is through I think not typically, I think you have to. And again, AWS people, keep me honest. So AWS,
technically you could edit their files because there'll be a .aws folder with two files, a credentials file and a access file or something. But yeah, this is just a GUI on top of those files.
You put your password in the your text file and
But you don't put your user account in there. You put in your access key and your secret.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't actually have a password that goes in there, just those keys. And there'll be it starts out with like a default user, and you can change that to put like the account ID of a service principal or some other equivalent kind of user.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you for that. And so again, here we say if it was my account and I'm trying to run AWS commands, I'm only going to get what it allows me to get. If the friendly neighborhood administrator gives me an access key and a secret that is higher privilege, then I can plug that stuff in and go cause more damage in the AWS account.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
How did you put the new command caret on a separate line from the?
I sometimes I have restricted windows.
How did you do that?
Yeah, that's cool.
I've never seen that.
So I like a full command line.
I've never seen that before.
It's just function, something on the order of function prompt, and this is PowerShell as opposed to Bash, function prompt, PWD, and that's, I think it might just be that. I don't remember, but something like that.
Huh.
I'm not going to do it because I don't want to screw up my prompt right now. If you don't mind. But it's more or less that simple. And with a couple of syntax tricks, we can take a look at it if you want. And a lot of people will put, they'll use that line to put, date, time, and get, your Git status and all kinds of crap, right? Yeah, some people put it on the same line, and then their cursor's all the way to the end, and they have 20 spaces to write their command in before it starts wrapping. That drives me nuts. So I'm the other extreme. Caret. That's it. That's all you get. Greater than. All right. So what was I doing? AWS. So I can do AWS, ECS, list clusters, if I remember correctly. Did I remember that correctly? Hey, look at that. Ooh. So this account or this key with its secret is tied to an account that has these for Elastic Container Service, ECS, clusters up in this account. I want to use a different account. I got to change my configuration, right? So now I got to remember, right? So very nice that it does this. This is really cool. I can go executing commands, like drop cluster or whatever, delete cluster. But I better be sure I've got the right key. So, nice and convenient, but beware. AWS or AZ, let me just remember because it always. So that's AWS. I don't know if there's really anything else to say about AWS. You get the idea. You got your credential. AZ show account. So Azure command line AZ. Sooner or later this will, of course. Show is misspelled. I don't think show is misspelled. I think it's just not the right word.
Oh, it's in the wrong order.
So same sort of thing, nice thing about the command line is I can go validate my credential, but I better watch out because if I'm starting to execute commands, it's going to be tied to whatever context they happen to be in. I can, go ahead and change that. Again, Azure has got a couple of nice things here. When I do AZ, it's going to default to authenticate me against the directory. So I got to prove who I am. If there's multi-factor that's involved, I've got to go through those hoops. So there's another layer of security that's added in here, and I don't have to write a secret down anywhere, right? I'm all good. I'm not recording a password. Whereas in the other case, hopefully that doesn't toast me. I don't recall if it does or not. If I cancel, if it's still going to let me go, it doesn't really matter at this point because I'm not dependent on AZ. But in my AWS scenario, I need to make sure that access key is, was in the AWS portal, right? So again, let's just go through I got to bring up AWS anyway for the next demo. So I might as well just get to it. And we'll go here. So to get into the portal, I got to provide a username and account. All great. If I go to account, no, not account. My security credentials. I come in here, I create an access key. When I create that access key, I got one shot at the password. I grab that password, I go to my configure, and I drop it in there. If that's the only place I'm ever going to use that access key, great. What if I'm going to use it someplace else? Now what do? I got to put it down somewhere. I got to, go to my note, go to my text file. That's, just drop it in there and I'm fine. And I can use it whenever I need it. So works, not great. The same thing can happen in Azure. It's not immune from this. I showed a login, which is going to be, again, tied to me, but if, again, we work with some clients who there's certain things they're only going to let service principals do or only let admins do, and they, dole out the use of the service principal. Well, as soon as they give me the service principal, they're opening themselves up to the same sort of problem. So they still have to trust me with that credential. Here's the form of the login that would use a service principal. And then again, I can do whatever the heck that service principal can do. And that is going to be, specify the username, which is the principal ID, and then the password, and then anything that principal has been provisioned to be able to do. Let's say at the subscription level, because again, the key point that service principal can be associated with accounts, resource groups, may or may not be able to be associated with users or with individual services, but I can't give a service principal account owner.
And would you have to have the service principal's password, or
Yep.
they give
Nope.
like a hash code?
Password's got to be put in there
Oh,
with this command.
okay.
So there are ways to protect it, but the brute force, not so great way would be just drop it in the command line and off you go. And again, that it's going to be securely stored on my machine, but I had to get it from whoever was giving it to me
Somehow, yeah.
to this command line, right?
Right.
So the identity one will open up like a similar window to the normal login where
where I can specify a different identity. And here I can specify the name of a managed identity.
And that'll like pop open like the browser to log in with it.
Yeah, I haven't actually used it. So
instead of providing whatever credentials you'd already have associated to Windows.
Instead of pasting the password on the command line.
instead of pasting the command, yeah, exactly, the password on the command line. I haven't actually used the managed identity for command. And that's fairly recent. I don't know when. I haven't been paying attention, so it could be a year old for all I know, or 2 years old for all I know, but I don't think it's that long.
It looks like a lot of blog articles came out about it since the beginning of 2021. So it feels relatively new.
Yeah, it definitely is new-ish. So then you always have to be careful because some of these features are in beta for, a year before they get publicly released, or, sometimes longer while they work out all the kinks. That's a scenario with tokens, configuring. We'll get into a bit more DevOps-y stuff in the next discussions. Actually, service connections is just a discussion. This is sort of a legacy thing. I don't know that we really want to talk about it anymore, except for to compare and contrast it with an OpenID approach. So Azure DevOps, we've done a bunch of presentations, done a bunch of work over the years with Azure DevOps. We're Microsoft partner for Azure DevOps. Microsoft bought GitHub, so we've de-emphasized DevOps going forward. We're doing more GitHub work than we are Azure DevOps work. We're still doing DevOps work. One of the approaches that the DevOps team came up with many years ago now was a thing called the service connection. So the service connection wrapped the principal in the Azure DevOps service. So rather than, having to pass this password around, an admin would create a service connection. So they'd grab the password from the principal. And again, a service principal, you can have multiple passwords. So you might have hey, here's the password that's related to Azure DevOps, or that's for Azure DevOps. An admin grabs that password, puts it into the service connection, wraps it in the service connection. They don't have to give anybody else access to that password. They just give people access to the service connection. Okay. And then you can, there's user accounts and provisioning with the service connections. The problem is this gets very unwieldy in larger organizations, and you end up with a lot of service connections. I can deploy to dev, I can deploy to test, I can deploy to prod. I've got this project, that project, this environment, that environment. All of a sudden, pretty soon you've got this big propagation. There's also a couple of security constraints with regards to who can create them and who can see them. So they're relatively global in nature, though you can provision them to individual projects. And really, from a separations of concern, they don't support all the use cases. They support many use cases, but not all the use cases around separation of concern. You don't want the prod service connection to be used by some knuckleheaded developer who might be a temp contractor who decided that, he wants to upload a bunch of proprietary information, via this credential to a public repo, for example, a public storage account that can then be downloaded by somebody else. Hypothetical-ish. Yeah.
You sound like maybe there's some experience.
Not direct, just rumors and innuendo. And that's as far as I'm going.
It was Reese, wasn't it?
This is recorded. I don't want to have to go in and cut out the middle of the recording. The beginning and the end is easy. The middle is a pain, so forget it. Okay, so that's service connections. All right, so on to the demo scenario, and then we'll wrap it up. So GitHub Actions OpenID Connect. So GitHub Actions, same as Azure DevOps CI/CD or Azure DevOps pipelines. They recently, as of 5 weeks ago, publicly made publicly available OpenID Connect, or released officially OpenID Connect. So again, OpenID Connect is not new. It's around. It's supported in many workflows and services and systems. This is JSON Web Token, JWTs that are used to make claims, and then if a claim is accepted, then the service on the other end is going to give a short-lived access token. So in this case, we're talking about GitHub specifically, talking about AWS. So we configure the OpenID in AWS in this case. It's supported in Azure, GCP, and a couple of other services as well. And again, specifically from GitHub, those cloud services support JWTs in many other instances. It's not just exclusive to GitHub. With a lot of auth scenarios and et cetera. We're just talking about GitHub Actions specifically. In the AWS case, we configure the cloud provider, or configure the OIDC for GitHub into the cloud provider. We configure the GitHub action to make this sort of request. And then that request is going to come along with claims. If the claims match up, then the provider is going to return a token. So in this way, we use IAM, access rights, access management, versus having a token or having a secret over and above this flow. There's no visible secrets. Secrets are passed around, but they're all under the covers, and we eliminate the secret. We eliminate the password, so it's passwordless. Okay.
What's IAM stand for again?
Access management.
I think it's identity access.
Identity and access management.
And that's a protocol, or
It's
just a concept.
the feature,
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha,
the feature.
It's usually associated with like users and roles and groups.
gotcha.
It's sort of
Yeah, so let's do this.
Oh, yeah, there it is right there.
Yeah, so identity and access management.
So this is just AWS's version of it?
This is
Yeah.
AWS's,
Implementation of it or whatever?
yep, exactly. So we have an identity provider. I've already provisioned this. I'm going to show you some code that'll actually do the provisioning. So we have identity providers that could be varied. And again, if for example, AWS has its own users and groups, it could also be authenticated with Okta. It could be authenticated against AD even. Azure AD, it could be authenticated against other folks. Of course, my battery is running low. Why wouldn't it be? Because it's about that. That's the owls.
Oh, that's for that.
Okay, well, we're just gonna move. We're gonna get cozy.
Take the owl down.
Okay, we're good. Yeah, careful with that. That's the owl. That's the
just trying to-
video. Okay, cheers. All right, so again, let me bump this up. Come on. So this provider is the GitHub identity provider, which has been configured into GitHub. Further, what we've created is a role. Again, this is AWS stuff. So this role has particular permissions. It's given a policy, and that policy defined by some nice package of JSON. And the short story is I can do some ECR or Elastic Container Registry. So Amazon's or AWS's container registry. So I can do some fun stuff on the container registry. And not only that, but for this particular policy, I've given it a very specific resource that can be managed, right? I can include wildcards here, but in this case, I've specified a specific resource. So the ARN starts with ARN. Cool. It's an AWS ARN. Awesome. ECR is the name of the service, Elastic Container Registry. Region, account ID, so this particular account. And then the claim is repository, or no, that's the ECR repository, and then the specific repository is called CoreOX Global Utils. So this role, which is the only thing this account can do, it can access this particular ECR, Elastic Container Registry. And just to show how I did this can be all set up manually, pointy clicky, set it up in what AWS calls the console, what Azure would call the portal. Portal's a console, which is kind of weird.
The name console throws you off.
Yeah, it's a command console. It's not like console. I thought my terminal was a console, whatever. Yeah, it's AWS console. Oh, don't care. All right, so we're gonna open a folder, and Teams is gonna say, sure, I'll get there. We'll let you have a little bit of, couple of CPUs to, couple of cycles to go open a folder. Why?
Watch it draw the window.
Why? Come on, man. It's not that hard. Hopefully, once it gets loaded, it will behave. Come on, man. You're killing me. Anybody got a joke they can tell while I open up a folder and VS Code?
Teams is a joke in and of itself.
Oh, this is so painful. I think it's this laptop and the USB-C connected monitors, which is why I was trying to go wireless before this thing started.
Yeah.
Or HDMI. That's better. It's not awesome, but it's way better than the USB-Cs going through a hub, and it's all kinds of pain.
All the strings.
All right, so what I've actually done here is created some Terraform. Yeah, okay, it's great that that's where my cursor is. Now, can we move it with the mouse or with the keypad or with anything? Anybody? Bueller?
So with all this secret stuff, do you think that at some point passwords will just kind of go away, or do you think they'll always kind of be there?
No, they're going away. It's an evolutionary process, right? So
Have a barcode on your wrist and
Scan you in.
and the chip, they're gonna, I mean, you know,
5G, man.
Will they do that with dogs and cats?
got the chip, it'll validate you when you walk in the door, and then you'll be good to go. But I think for example, some people are worried about security and privacy. I don't, if Microsoft wants a picture of my face, I don't really give a crap. But I open up my laptop with my face and authenticate. My phone has got a fingerprint device on it. So, my bank and Starbucks. When I want to reload my card. What else uses? There's something else that uses. There's a secure store on the phone that will use my fingerprint.
Oh, like biometrics.
Biometric, yeah. So biometric. So that's definitely happening.
Is OpenID built on top of OAuth too?
Yeah, it's OAuth.
It's just
Is it the same?
a layer above
A
OAuth.
protocol leveraging an OAuth protocol, right? So
So it's
OAuth.
not like a whole new thing.
It's not a whole new thing. It's just a particular, that OAuth flow with the claims.
It's like an opinionated OAuth.
Yeah, service to service.
Mm.
So
is it like an open source implementation
I think it's all open source. So all OAuth and OpenID and et cetera.
Yeah.
And there are some complaints that I've read that GitHub does not implement OAuth correctly,
Oh, really?
which is kind of a common, because I think there's some wiggle room in the spec. It's not discrete enough. So I don't know the full story there, so don't quote me on it. I think, because this is just not moving for me, if you guys don't mind, I'm gonna yank the cable. So
I can
maybe
plug my
if
owl
you
in.
can share his screen. So I'll continue to share my screen, but I'm gonna see if
Like a
not
TV.
driving the second display will actually allow me to.
I can always get my laptop too. You know,
I don't care.
this is good.
We'll just stare at Phil from over here.
Yeah, so that,
You're screen sharing. Oh, we're good. We're
I
up.
mean, it's not screaming, but it's moving, so. All right, so again, this is Terraform. We've talked about Terraform before. Might be an area we want to talk about again in one of these meetups, so I'm gonna assume you know Terraform. Or no, actually, ask me as many questions as you want about Terraform, and maybe I'll answer them.
The videos kind of.
Can we use it to build a moon base?
Can you what?
Use it to build a moon base?
Yeah, absolutely.
How's the audio coming through for people online? Because the video looks kind of choppy. I wonder if your audio is okay. Good. Okay. Thumbs up.
Audio's all good.
Awesome.
Oh, okay. Looks like the video caught it a little bit.
Now this computer can breathe.
All right, so I put together a bit of Terraform to provision this stuff. The idea being there are things that I'm going to need to set based on the repo. The role that I showed just does ECR. There's going to be many other, or the policy that I showed is just ECR. There's going to be many other policies across all the services. They may want to tweak it, tune it, allow access to certain resources based on whether I'm deploying to development environments or to a production environment. So there's a lot that you can configure. So building that provisioning from the ground up in infrastructure as code, which is what Terraform is, has a number of advantages. And we'll get to that. There's a little bit, I got a little bit of a summary. So yeah. We talked about this a little bit. I did want to show the claims. Let me show that real quickly just to complete the story. It'll help tie some things together. So we talked about the identity provider itself. That's the GitHub service that's going to deliver the claims to AWS. We talked about the AWS role, which is going to allow or not allow that that claim to do anything, and then we've got a policy which is going to control access to resources. The token that's provided by GitHub to AWS is going to include all the properties you see in that box in the token claims list. Specify a type, a couple other things, thumbprint to verify that A is the official provider. Do the thumbprints match? Is somebody trying to spoof or not? There's a sub there, which is key. So that sub is going to be the repo that this claim is coming from, the organization, and the repo. So the way GitHub is organized, it's organized into organizations and then repos within the organization. So I'm going to get both of those pieces of information, as well as an environment. So GitHub supports environments, which are typically used to segregate dev, test, prod, those sorts of things. You can use them for whatever you want, but they also provide the prod, the environment prod. So AWS can check, oh, this is a claim coming from a given repo in the prod environment. So I'll allow this to proceed, and I'll return a token, an auth token that can be used to provision resources or to update websites or whatever it is it's going to do. And then there's an audience, which again is the organization, and a bunch of other information that can be checked on the role side to verify, that this role we're going to let the trying to come up with the right name for it. We're going to let this role be assumed if these conditions are matched. And again, we'll see that in a minute. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to say before I got into this.
I didn't know GitHub had like environments.
Yeah.
Just like by branch, or I don't even.
They're set up independent of branches. Yes.
I've never used it.
Yeah, I can do a quick show of those later. They're handy. So the one thing you can do with environments is you can have secrets per environment. Mm-hmm. So if I had, for example, if I had an access key and a password that was different per environment, I could set those in secrets, and then I can use them in my workflow. And actually, I'll show you some of the code, the GitHub Actions flow. All right, so things like, it seems like things are finally starting to get moving here. So in Terraform, again, Terraform is infrastructure as code. Terraforming, provision, creating services, creating resources in a cloud environment. In this case, I'm provisioning to AWS. And in this case, all I'm provisioning is roles, is the identity provider and roles. I'm not actually provisioning resources. I'm assuming these resources exist already, which is a little bit of a cheat from a real world scenario, but hey, we're already an hour into this and I'm not done yet. So we're going to skip over some stuff. So I've mentioned 3 different resources, 2 ECR repositories and an AWS bucket. The assumption is these exist already. All I'm doing is provisioning against those resources. So I have a resource which is the OpenID provider. So when I ran this earlier, I provisioned the provider, which I just showed you in the AWS console. Okay, so this actions, client ID, and thumbprint all got provisioned for me. These are constant, static. They don't ever change for the GitHub provider. But I provisioned them into this account, right? So if I have multiple accounts, I can use the same script, and run it to provision, because this has to be provisioned in each AWS account that you're going to provision resources in. That's roughly equivalent to AWS or Azure subscription if you're in Azure land. And accounts can be organized into an enterprise, and there's organization concepts, but again, that's not what we're talking about. So the next thing we have is a role, that role I showed you. So this basically says, hey, this role, we're going to allow this role to be assumed with web identity, which allows it to do, allows the possibility to do a bunch of stuff. In and of itself, it's not giving it any authority other than to be able to assume the role. And again, this is a bit of Terraform stuff. What's the type of principal that is going to be associated with this role, and this is just a reference to the provider that I provisioned. And then there's a condition on this role, and it is basically saying if the sub that is coming out of the token, so I'm going to be giving the claims, I'm going to be making a request. That request is going to include the claims. I reference the claims with this syntax: token actions, GitHub user content, com:/sub. So that's the sub token. If it matches this value, it comes from the organization that I specify. Var is just a way for me to specify a variable. If it's coming from the repo, and any environment, so that's star, that wildcard, any environment. So I don't care what environment it is. And in fact, in this repo, I'm not using environments, so I pretty much have to use star. If I'm coming from a different organization or I'm coming from a different repo, this claim is going to be denied. And this is critical when you're setting this up, because I don't want to provision this identity provider without a condition, because if somebody knows what the account is, anybody on the internet, anybody with GitHub, could go start provisioning stuff into my AWS account, or removing stuff from my AWS account, or doing whatever the heck they want from my AWS account via GitHub Actions. So this is a really critical component. And this is also where, this role might be for, star, but I might have another role which is specifically for the prod environment, at which point I would put, prod here or some such. Right, so this role can only be used if the claim is coming from a prod environment GitHub action. Okay, is that making some sense? Mm-hmm. I'm going to try and get through this. And so this role just rolls it up and applies it. And then I have a policy. And in this policy, this is where I'm telling it, all right, so attached to this role is ECR, or the ability to do ECR. And again, I've attached it to a specific resource, which is in ARN syntax, but here I'm doing a variable substitution. So I had a data resource, and a data resource is just, what it does is it just reaches out to AWS, grabs the details for that resource, and then I can grab properties, and one of those is the ARN. So I go out to AWS, grab the ECR, grab the ARN, substitute it in here, and then I'm applying that policy with these additional statements to the GitHub, to the role that I created. So I'm attaching role policy attachment, I'm attaching the policy to the role. So yeah, those three things that I showed, this Terraform is just getting all that stuff hooked together. There's a little bit of an extra statement here because ECR has an additional auth request. So can I access ECR? Great, now I'm going to sign into the ECR. And that's what this additional statement is required for.
And this setup is so that you can publish from GitHub Actions and publish into the Elastic Container Registry.
Correct.
Your images.
Correct. Bingo. You're a great straight man, Reese. Because the very next thing that I want to show you is a sample GitHub action workflow, which we're going to run. And actually, it's already run. So I'm just going to quickly show you that. But let's walk through this real quickly. So, and again, GitHub Actions, not necessarily a GitHub Actions session, but ask away. This is just YAML YAML and GitHub Action syntax. On push means every time I push to my repo, it's going to trigger this workflow to run. I'm only pushing this on a branch, so it's not causing haywire in my repo. I specify a couple of environment variables, which are going to get used later. I have to give it permissions. So because I'm using this OAuth flow, I have to make sure that my token can write. All right, so then I have jobs. I can split my action into multiple jobs. I only have one job here, which is just to check the OpenID Connect flow. I'm saying, hey, this is going to run on Ubuntu. It's a hosted runner, a runner hosted by GitHub. Now, first thing I do is clone the repository to get the source, which I probably don't need in this scenario, but I'm doing it anyway. And then I configure credentials. So this is the key point. So this action is going to hit AWS and authenticate so that I can go run stuff against AWS. Here I'm specifying this is the role I want to assume. So I have a naming convention. When I provision it, I use a naming convention use that name in my action. Session doesn't really matter, just uniquely specifies it, and region I think defaults, but I'm specifying it here anyway to region US West East. Now compare that with what I had here previously, which is grabbing an access key and a secret. All right, so this is GitHub syntax, which is going to go into GitHub secret store to pull that data out, right? So when I had that, when I created my access key, assuming I didn't write it down in my text file, I pull it out of the console, the AWS console, copy it into my GitHub secret. If that cycles, it gets invalidated, I got to go do that again. The good news is it's protected. Nobody can see that secret. Because again, the GitHub secret is going to be hidden. I can't ever see it again once I paste it in. So if I'm wondering if it's correct, my only choice to try and make it correct is to paste the secret again.
Oh, you literally can't see it.
You cannot see it again.
Even you. Oh.
Nope. You can once you write it, all you can do is update it. So again, that's the variable substitution, but I don't need that anymore. I can just do this.
Is the slightly up a bit above the commented out code role to assume? Is that like something you might typically put in your environment, or
could be an environment variable? It could be calculated if you have a more complex environment. It could be, that could itself be a secret if you want it to be.
Like, is this something that might change depending on the environment you're in? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it could. So again, let's think about this. there's a couple of different configuration options. I mean, there are not a couple, lots of different ways to configure this. I might have a common role that's used for many different purposes. And I have policies that are going to get invoked based on where I'm coming from or what environment I'm coming from.
And your Terraform stuff is creating this role, correct?
Correct.
And so when you create it, well, in this case, if I recall, when you created that role, you did like splat for the environment. So this could work for prod, this could work for dev, but you might do it for like, you might do it by environment. In
Correct.
which case you and get your action would want to probably use an environment variable or something, or just a different action. I don't know.
Correct. And again, this is where there's a lot of different ways to do it. And the bottom line is you're probably not going to have one role. You're probably going to have multiple roles. And the role itself can have many policies attached. That can be conditionally pulled into that role based on the token parameters.
Gotcha.
So the typical way this is going to be done, I don't know what's going to be typical, but it's highly likely that you're going to have multiple different roles. Let's say based on project. I mean, a lot of it depends on how your accounts are set up as well. So you can have many accounts. So you might provision the accounts and then have a standard for what the role names are within your accounts because there's segregation across the accounts. Or you might say within an account, I've got all these services, including dev, test, and prod, and I'm going to segregate those services based on the policies that I attach. Right, in this environment, this account that I'm provisioning into, we have dev, test, you saw my list of clusters. We actually have ECS clusters, production, dev, test. They're all separate clusters. Those even could have been one single cluster, but we made them separate clusters. They're all in the same account. Mm-hmm. No reason not to do that. It's perfectly acceptable. It's locked down. You know, the streams are not going to be crossing. It's all good to go. But, you know, some knuckleheaded auditor who doesn't really know what they're doing could come in and could say, you cannot have production in the same account as dev. What? Why not? I got it. Doesn't matter. You can't do it. All right, so fine. I'm going to create another account, put my production resource over there.
And you said accounts are loosely analogous to a resource group.
Yeah, they're pretty good to a subscription.
Or subscription.
Yeah, they're. I mean, Reese, you're familiar with both AWS, Azure. I would say that they're pretty equivalent.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so far so good. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log into ECR, and then I just do a simple command to list the images out of the registry. Notice that I also have a couple of other commands in here to list images out of another ECR, which I didn't provision. And I also have it copying a file to a S3 bucket, which is just a storage account, AWS or Azure storage account. Okay, so that's what my workflow is going to do. And we're going to cut to at least we're going to take the first cake out of the oven. Actually, we're going to pretend we took it out of the oven. It's already been baked. And if I could just switch my window to here, open up a new tab. And this is a fresh reboot, people. 32 gigs of RAM, 8 virtual cores. GitHub. Actually, I wish yeah, we can get to it quick. We'll go here, go to actions, go down to test OpenID request. So this is the actions running, and these are all the runs. You can see 12 workflow runs. Red is failed, green is good. So you see I had a couple in there. But let's see what's going on here. So if I go drill into this and inspect the run, so set up the job, clone the repository, configure the AWS credentials. So this is executing that command to AWS configure. So it said, yeah, you're good to go. Your claims matched how I'm configured, so I'll let you go on. We log into the ECR, all good. I list images. These are all the images that are in that repository that I've configured. Awesome. Things are just flying. We're rocking, we're rolling. Up. I want to list images out of another ECR. No dice. Okay, rejected. I can fix that. Maybe tonight, maybe some other day. So if we go to this guy. Come on, you. I'm gonna go Chicago pretty soon. That means swearing like a banshee.
You're gonna reprovision your AWS
I am.
role question mark.
Yeah, so you can see the you can see that little the comment, which I'm trying to get rid of like really hard. So here I've said, two resources, right? So my ECR, my main ECR repository, and also my repository of Nginx images.
I always thought it was Nginx.
Nginx?
Until like a week ago.
Nginx, I'm sorry, you can't.
You read stuff all the time, but no one ever says it out loud.
You cannot convince me that it should be pronounced a different way.
No, that's what I thought.
I mean, you're free to pronounce it any way you want, but I'm pronouncing it Nginx because I like it. And a GUID is a GUID, not a GUID. Those are the people who go to England and prance around to the stones every once in a while. GUIDs.
I still don't know if the guy who created Python, whose name is pronounced Guido or Guido. I've heard both ways. Guido Van Rossum or Guido Van Rossum.
Well, he's not Italian, right? So I think it's Guido.
I think he's Swedish. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, that's the one I've heard more
Isn't
often.
he? I think
No,
he's
not Swedish.
he's no, he's flip.
Guido Van Rossum.
All I know is that he likes jazz guitarists, so we're good.
Oh, he's Dutch. Yeah.
Oh.
TFM, so there's my alias that we were talking about in the preamble. TFM plan dash out plan dot out. So this is basically the quote unquote compile step of Terraform, basically taking my definition changes and creating a plan for me.
Your GitHub Actions doesn't do it for you.
I'm sorry?
Your GitHub Actions doesn't do it for you.
It could. I didn't do that here. I'm just doing it. I'm deploying from command line.
You have to write commands on the command line? What is this?
So, step at a time, man. I didn't want to make it too, I didn't want to make it too complicated. So I'm going to expect that whatever the heck that plan is, it's good. Good policy is to actually check what the heck that said and make sure it's doing the right thing, because Terraform is known to destroy resources and, when you're not paying attention.
Is this actually applying it, or is this
It's
just
applying
testing it?
Yeah, apply.
TF apply is going to actually take the plan and apply it.
But is there like a dry run type thing? Is that
No.
what no, you just send it?
I just send it, man.
Can
Send
you
it.
Check it.
Yeah, there's a plan command where you can actually see it.
I'm going to send it,
See what it's
Joseph.
gonna do.
Yeah.
I sent it.
Send
He
it, full
sent
send,
it.
no half sendies here, sendies. That's what it puked out on the command line, was the plan did.
Yeah, he put it into a file, but yeah.
I sent it. So we're going to rerun all jobs. I didn't change any source. All I did was,
Oh,
change the, independently changed AWS configuration.
got high hopes.
Did that Terraform actually kick off this GitHub, or did you just go in there and kick it off yourself? The action, I guess.
I just reran the jobs.
Oh,
I reran the job, source didn't change, my workflow didn't change.
Yeah, nothing in your, like,
oh,
nothing in your GitHub repo is different, right? You
Yep.
apply the Terraform changes to now you're at your AWS role will allow for one other thingy.
What's
Maybe.
going on here?
Supposedly.
Okay, so
Oh,
there was a
same
little bit of a weird stuff, but you,
oh yeah, it made it past the other one.
so it made it past.
The list, yeah, the listing. I saw it for a second.
I seen it.
It was there, I swear, it was there.
Terraform syntax is like JSON, but they just removed all the colons.
It's a Terraform definition language, or what's it called, something, they came up with their own little friggin'.
Because YAML or JSON just
Yeah,
couldn't
just
cut it.
kind of, it's a little bit of both. It's like the best of both worlds. And so you can see, all right, awesome. I can now list Nginx images, but I can't copy the S3 bucket. So, what are we gonna do next? We're gonna go in and do more policy. So I've got a S3 policy here, which is totally commented out. There's a little bit of a thing with, what did I just do?
I think you closed the file.
Okay. This is Control A, Control K, U. Wait, what's uncomment? Why are my hands not working anymore? I'm not connected to a big display. I should be able to still type. What's uncomment, people? Tell me. Control.
KU.
Control/.
There we go. Thank you.
KU is for weird Visual Studio users.
That's what it is too.
All right, so we're going to comment this out for a second because this has not been enough pain. So we're going to do another demo. Actually, you know what? What time is it?
7:30.
All right, we're not doing that. We're going to just go ahead and.
Control Z.
But yeah, the point, we got access to the different resources. All you had to do is.
So if I didn't do that, because this S3 bucket, even though I'm giving it access via these policy statements, the resource itself is protected by a policy that says you can't add any policies. Or I'm not going to accept any new policies.
That's defined in Terraform, or
That's defined in AWS.
Oh.
But when I say star, it's like, screw you, I'm overriding everything. I'm going to allow this, I'm basically what I'm saying is I'm allowing this action to override any of the policy restrictions and go do what it needs to do.
-F.
Roughly equivalent.
Yeah.
So under normal circumstances, if the S3 bucket wasn't protected, the policy statement that I have above would allow me to do stuff to that bucket. But since I have other policy statements on that bucket, which I don't want to remove, I'm just overriding them with this statement.
That's interesting that you can just override it.
Well, it's admin. I'm now saying I'm an admin. Now, just because I put this in here, the only reason I get to do that is because my AWS account, which I'm using to apply these commands, is an admin.
It's like a force merge to master, force push to master.
Force push, more or less. And again, the tricky thing about this Terraform code is not the code itself. I mean, I could have this branched and pushed and run, but I'm messing with it. I'm going up and down, and there's actually Terraform state that's maintained. So that manages, what it thinks what it wants my AWS resources to be. So, I'm telling it, hey, these are the roles and rights that I want. I'm making a coded change to that state. Make Terraform, make it so. Make sure that my role, in this case, roles and policies match what you're saying. So, going back and forth in branches and revisions, you got to be a little bit careful. Because if the state doesn't match, you're going to totally torque yourself up. So I'm just, rerunning it and reapplying and whatever. When I uncommented that stuff out, as I ran through this demo, tweaking stuff up and getting stuff revision, I'm like, all right, well, I want to roll back and actually show the progression and show things getting applied. I just went in and commented that stuff out, as you saw, reran the plan. Terraform said, oh, you don't want those anymore? Fine, I'll get rid of them for you. So, updated the policy to take out the ARN, take out the S3 policy, and I was good to go. So I planned, remember to apply, plan.out. And then once that applies, I can rerun the action and it'll go, it'll actually do the copy. Okay, so let's go back to come on, man. Killing me. Of course, let's make it even more painful by navigating to a different screen because of extra clicks that I.
Do you have malware on your computer?
Apparently.
Or just Teams?
Just Teams. It's apparently enough. I was having a heck of a time a while ago too, and part of it again was, the device, but part of it also was one of the VPNs that I had to install for a client project. Required its own scanner.
Oh.
And like the night before I was in my presentation, Windows updated. So it was like spinning like crazy. Then I fire up Teams. I didn't really notice until I fired up Teams, and it was Zoom actually in this case. It was like locked up, done. Couldn't do anything. All right, so we're gonna rerun all jobs. So we got no other change, and it's gonna do the copy. I don't know. Yeah, check out, blah, 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 blah. Let me just go to. Take your hands off the keyboard, see what happens. Yeah, so green, back to green. Woo. All right, so that's just a little touch, a little smattering of Terraform actions, leveraging GitHub OIDC Connect, no passwords, no secrets. Now, of course, it's not all kittens and rainbows. Can we please just go back to the deck? Thank you, appreciate it. Voice commands, who knew? So going back to the Terraform comment, so we're codifying those role definitions. We're tracking changes in a repo, and we're realigning any out of band changes. So, I do all this stuff. I get the roles the way I want. Reese has admin account, admin access. He goes into the console and starts messing with my roles. I rerun my Terraform, and it's going to realign everything.
Oh,
In other words, it's gonna trash all his changes and put what I've got back in place.
Okay,
Right.
so that's what the Terraform was about, okay.
That's certainly one big thing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you can imagine, especially when it comes to roles and rights. It's like, why would I do that in Terraform? I can just blah, 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 blah. Well, because this starts to get fairly complex and I might have a programmed way to, or I've got, as the security administrator in AWS or whatever, I've got a way that I want to put this together. So that's one big advantage, right? So I can put this together, I can have it codified. I'm not dependent on some rando admin going in and messing with my roles using the console, because I can restore it. The other bit is that, Terraform in its language can do looping, iteration, and apply a script to multiple different environments. So let's say I wanted this provision, this role change, or these role changes in 10 accounts. I can list 10 accounts and run that, just very quickly run that Terraform against all 10 accounts without having to write it 10 times. So that's,
log in to each one or so.
yeah.
Can you run Terraform against like a local machine provider type thing? Or like, how do you dev test it without actually having resources? You don't.
You actually have resources. You have a dev account or a dev, dev
But there's
set.
no way to
resources.
you can't use Terraform by itself. Like you have to use it with something to run anything.
So have to, want to.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you want to in prod, but like if I'm just like, oh, my little Python project, I just want to test my Terraform thingies.
When you use Terraform, you're provisioning. So when you test, you want to be provisioning resources. There are test fixtures, and we've talked about this. There's like code analysis that you can do. But when you're testing, it's integration tests. There's
no unit testing.
Not really. I mean, it's like JavaScript. I mean, when you,
I think you can test JavaScript.
you can test it, but I mean, it's not compiled, it's script, you're testing it against live stuff. It's not like JavaScript. I don't know why I said that. That was weird.
Yeah, but with the plan feature, you sort of can.
You can at least look and see
Look
what
and
it's
see
gonna do.
what's it gonna do, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
and that it's gonna show you not a diff of the current environment and what changes it's making. It's just showing you how it's gonna configure things.
Correct.
It's not showing you like, this is how it is, this is the one thing we're gonna add. It just shows you this is how it's all gonna be.
No,
It will.
Or it'll show you like, this is
so-
how it is, this is how you want it, this is the one change we're actually gonna make.
Yes, and there's also a caveat to this. And that is that, it used to be that it was absolutely that way. Here's my state, here's my resources, here's my Terraform. It's gonna go look at the state and say, what changes are you making to the state? All right, that's what we're gonna do. It will go, and again, classic scenarios, I've got an S3 bucket. I make some change in the properties to the storage account, S3 bucket, whatever. And it says, okay, yeah, I can make those changes, but to make those changes, I have to destroy the bucket and then I'll recreate it. No problem, don't worry about it. But what about all the files I got in the S3 bucket? So you gotta watch out for those sorts of scenarios. The other thing is that recently, and more, Terraform will also report on changes that were made in the AWS environment that aren't reflected in your state. So it'll actually go in during the plan phase and it'll inspect your AWS environment and do some rationalization there as well to warn you that, hey, you might want to take a closer look at this because somebody made changes in your AWS environment.
Someone made like a manual change and you're just gonna nuke it.
You're gonna nuke it, right? And it'll tell you, it doesn't stop you. And there are commands that says, hey, if this is gonna happen or that's gonna happen, don't do it. You can also tag the resources to say, don't ever delete this resource. So there's some level of protection that can be put in. It's evolved quite a bit over the last few years. They're investing heavily. There's been a big uptick, and again, is it the greatest thing since sliced bread? No, but it's pretty handy.
Yeah. You can do some testing with the thing called TerraTest, which is sort of like unit testing, but like you were saying, typically you want to do the full integration test because there's only so many things you can do with
Right.
not actually deploying the resources.
Yeah.
But there is some checks you can do, like if you wanted to, determine that some state got changed a certain way, like maybe you added a variable, you want to make sure that it was in there, or stuff like that, or or you had resources out there and you want to make sure that they get deleted or whatever, but,
Yeah.
so yeah, there's tools out there to use.
Gotcha.
Cool.
And Jenny wrote a pretty sophisticated test infrastructure for one of our clients. And again, the big deal with that project was making sure that security settings were set correctly. So that test fixture basically ran through, deployed all this Terraform into an actual Azure environment, and then inspected the resources to make sure that the security settings were all correct. That was part of the test.
Interesting.
And then it destroyed them all. And the nice thing about Terraform is I can go in there and do a Terraform destroy, and it'll wipe out everything that I created.
Gotcha. That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, the thing you notice about this is a bit meta because I still need an account ID to go provision this stuff. And that account ID or, that role, whatever, I've got to be somebody who has enough administrative privilege that I can mess with roles and policies and implement an ID provider. But the deal is, I've only got one of those instead of having to provision, accounts to every dev team across my organization.
So can you use, because you ran the Terraform apply from your local machine using like the CLI, but you could set it up so, could you use OpenID with an admin account and GitHub Actions?
Not to do the ID provisioning, but once the ID is provisioned, I could do all the rest of it with OpenID.
Yeah, I guess that makes it, you can't provision the thing you're trying to use with, but once that's set up, you can.
It's like storing your configuration settings and your database configuration setting in your database.
Flawless. But once that's set up, you can have that admin account, like GitHub Actions can use that admin account.
Yeah, I could have the ID provider be a data source. So I could say, look, this is three things, just on the account. Don't mess with it. There's also other techniques like CloudFormation templates, right, in different ways. So you could say, hey, whenever I create an account, automatically provision the ID provider. And then I can use that as a data source to my action. I can go get the ARN of the ID provider, then use that and the rest of my script. In my case, I created it so I know what the ARN is already.
Right.
But I could just as easily have used it as a data source. Once I've created it, though, I don't need to create it again. And that, the assumption is like, look, for this account, I've got this set of state. It's got the ARN. It's got everything in it. So, it's all together in one place. All right, so beware roles provisioning of resources that may also do deprovisioning. So there's a whole bunch of additional scenarios related to these topics that would be more application specific. If we had time, like somehow magically I got through that in an hour or something, we could have gone through Elastic Container Service. And this is common with a lot of services, so something I'd recommend, always looking at. The service has built-in capability to go get secrets out of Keystore, or out of the secrets manager, AWS secrets manager. So, it minimizes the amount of stuff that you've got to manage from a secrets perspective. We've got a pretty full-fledged Elastic Container Service provisioning going on, multiple environments, lots of secrets, and most of the secrets we don't even know what they are. We never needed to know what they are because as soon as we created them, we just set them into the secret manager and they're just read from then on out. So it's pretty cool stuff. Okay, future topics. Feedback on other things to cover in the future, always appreciated. So some of the things we've talked about in the past are around Kubernetes. There's somebody who's asking about Helm deploy. Managing identities within Kubernetes is interesting. Logging is also a big topic, and something that I've done a bit of recently is reusable workflows in GitHub Actions. So ways to refactor bits of script for GitHub Actions or anything else. Happy to
Has there been
entertain topics.
A Terraform specific DevOps talk?
Probably not in a while.
That's something I've been interested in learning, but just haven't spent the time and haven't needed to use it on a project.
All right, we'll do that in January.
I definitely second Joseph on that one. I would love to hear a Terraform one.
Okay, we'll do Terraform in January.
Something that might be interesting to consider too is it seems like a lot of DevOps concepts or conversations are sort of around the tooling versus like the culture aspect and how do you get people to buy off on it and these network admins that are holding on for dear life to their processes and so that could be the whole soft side or I don't know what you call that but you know what I mean. People process and what's the other thing? I don't know, can't remember anymore. I've spent a lot of time talking about the people side and some about the process side. Tools, right? So we're focusing a lot on tools. Some process, right? Because you always want some process around the way you use the tools. But yeah, the people is the most important thing.
PPT, People Process Technology Framework.
Yeah. Yeah, people, process, and tools is the way I think about it.
PPT.
People, process, and tech.
PowerPoint.
Okay.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you guys for participating.